My name is Sarah, I'm 29, and last night I thought I was finally free from my family's chaos. But this morning, my phone lit up with 14 missed calls from my parents. The same people who chose my sister over me when she screamed I ruined their lives. Something's wrong, but I don't know if I'm ready to hear it. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments, and subscribe for more stories about family drama and emotional courage. When my phone buzzed that morning, I didn't think much of it. I was half asleep, my old box fan humming in the corner, the cheap curtains barely keeping the sun from burning through. But then I rolled over, squinting at the screen, and saw the number. Not 1, not 2, 14. 14 missed calls. All from the same contact, Mom and Dad. For a moment, I thought I was still dreaming. I blinked, rubbed my eyes, even turned the phone off and back on. But the red notifications didn't lie. 14 times, between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m., they had tried to reach me. My first thought wasn't worry, it was dread. That sinking feeling you get in your gut when the people you've tried hardest to escape suddenly yank at the chain again. I sat up, my bare feet pressing against the cold linoleum. My apartment was silent, too silent. No shouting, no doors slamming, no footsteps pacing the hallway like I'd grown used to back home. For the past 6 months, I'd lived in this tiny place by myself. It wasn't much: second-hand couch, chipped coffee table, and a kitchen sink that leaked if I turned the faucet too far, but it was mine. It was peace. The phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a missed call. It was a voicemail notification. My thumb hovered over it, but my chest felt tight. I couldn't press play. Not yet. Because my mind went straight back to the last time I saw them. The night I walked out. It had started with something so small. Dinner. Just another weeknight. My dad chewing too loudly, my mom asking me if I had plans yet for a real job, and my sister rolling her eyes at me like I was nothing. Then out of nowhere, she slammed her fork down and screamed at me. "You've ruined our lives, Sarah. Everything is harder because of you." Her voice still rang in my ears, months later. And my parents? They didn't even pause. Didn't ask why. Didn't defend me. They turned as if rehearsed, and stood by her. My mother's lips curled like she was spitting poison. My father's face hardened in silence. That silence was worse than yelling. I tried to explain. I told them I wasn't the reason she couldn't keep a job. I wasn't the reason money was tight. I wasn't the reason they argued late at night. But nothing mattered. My sister kept shouting, and every word she threw, they caught and carried like it was truth carved into stone. I remember standing up, my chair scraping the floor. My dad pointing at the door, not even saying it out loud, just pointing. That image was tattooed in my memory. His fingers stretched out, his jaw clenched, my sister's smirk. So I left. I left with nothing but a backpack. No goodbye, no promise to call. Just the slam of the door behind me, the sting of cold night air, and the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. That was 6 months ago. I never went back. I never called. And they never called me, until now. My phone buzzed again, vibrating on the nightstand. I jumped. This time, I forced myself to listen to the voicemail. "Sarah, it's Mom, we need you to call back. Please. Just call." Her voice cracked, shaky, unlike the cold, sharp tone I was used to. Another voicemail, my father's. "Sarah, pick up the phone. This isn't a game." His voice was lower, clipped, but there was something new in it too. Not anger. Desperation. The last one was just silence. No words, just muffled breathing before the line cut off. I wrapped my blanket tighter around me. My heart raced, but my brain was split in two. One half screamed at me to ignore it, to protect the fragile peace I had built for myself. The other half, it whispered with a cruel curiosity. What if something's wrong? What if they actually need me? I stood up and started pacing the small room. My bare feet left faint prints on the cold floor. I thought about my job at the diner, the long shifts I worked just to keep rent paid. I thought about Mrs. Parker, the elderly neighbor across the hall, who always left cookies by my door when she baked too much. Those people, the strangers I had built a new life with, felt more like family than the ones who had raised me. But still, 14 calls. In the dead of night. I grabbed my coat, thinking maybe I'd just go for a walk, clear my head. The air outside was crisp, biting, and I pulled the hood tighter around my face. Streetlights flickered above me, casting long shadows on the cracked sidewalk. A group of teenagers laughed down the block, their voices echoing. It reminded me of nights long ago, when I'd sneak out just to breathe, just to escape the tension at home. As I walked, the phone buzzed again. My hand shook as I pulled it from my pocket. One new message. This time from my sister. Sarah, please answer. I need you. I stopped walking. My breath came out in a cloud of fog. My sister, who had told me I ruined her life. My sister, who had smirked the night I left. My sister, who had never once apologized. Now she was begging. I stared at the glowing screen, my thumb hovering over call back. Every part of me wanted to throw the phone into the gutter and keep walking, but my pulse thudded so loud I could hear it in my ears. What could have happened that would make her reach out? What disaster had cracked the unshakable wall of my family's loyalty? I didn't have the answer yet. But standing there, on that cracked sidewalk under a flickering streetlight, I knew one thing. My life was no longer the same. And those 14 calls, they were only the beginning. I stood frozen on that cracked sidewalk, the glow of my sister's message still burning on my phone screen. Her words pulled me back in time like a riptide, dragging me straight into the night when everything finally snapped. It was a Thursday. I remember because Dad always grilled chicken on Thursdays, no matter the season. He believed routines kept families strong. I used to believe that too, until routines turned into cages. The smell of charred meat filled the kitchen. The TV hummed low in the living room, some game show my mom half-watched while she set the table. My sister, Hannah, scrolled through her phone, tapping her nails against the screen. Her chair tilted back farther than Mom liked. Dad came in with the platter, proud like he'd hunted the bird himself. We sat down. The scrape of forks against plates filled the silence. At first, it was just another quiet dinner. Then it started. So Sarah, Mom said, cutting into her chicken. Any progress on finding a better job? Something with benefits, maybe? You can't work at that diner forever. I kept my eyes on my plate. I'm managing fine. Hannah let out a laugh. Not a real laugh, but that sharp kind, the one meant to sting. Managing? You're barely scraping by. Mom, she's wasting her life. Dad cleared his throat. Your sister's right. You're 29. Don't you want more for yourself? I swallowed hard, my fork clinking against the plate. I'm not asking anyone here for help. I pay my own way. That's more than some people can say. That's when Hannah slammed her fork down. The sound rang through the kitchen like a gunshot. Her face twisted, eyes burning with a mix of anger and triumph. You've ruined our lives, Sarah, she screamed. Everything is harder because of you. You've done nothing but drag this family down since the day you were born. The room froze. My chest tightened, but not from shock. From recognition. She'd been saying versions of that for years, always with a smirk, always with Mom and Dad ready to nod along. But this time, the words came like a final verdict. I waited for Mom to tell her she'd gone too far. I prayed for Dad to put his hand up and calm things down. Instead, they turned to me. She's not wrong, Mom said quietly, but the edge in her voice was sharp. We've sacrificed so much because of you. Always covering for your mistakes. Always picking up where you fall short. Mistakes? My mind raced through the years. Working double shifts to pay off bills Hannah ran up on credit cards. Taking care of chores while she disappeared with friends. Being blamed when arguments broke out because I didn't let things go. I found my voice, shaking but steady. I've held this family together more times than you realize. You just don't see it because you never wanted to. Hannah leaned forward, her smile cruel. There it is, the victim act. Always pretending you're the martyr. Face it, Sarah, you've never done anything right. You're the reason Dad's stressed, the reason Mom's tired, the reason. Enough. I snapped, louder than I meant to. My chair scraped back, the legs screeching against the floor. Dad's face went cold. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He just raised his hand and pointed at the door. That gesture cut deeper than any words could. It was final. No discussion. I looked at him, at Mom, at Hannah's smug grin. My throat burned. After everything I've done for you. This is what you think of me." No one answered. The silence said everything. I grabbed my coat from the chair, my hands trembling. My eyes stung, but I wouldn't let them see me cry. Not then. Not after years of being their scapegoat. As I walked to the door, Hannah's voice followed me. "Don't come back when you realize you've got nothing without us." I paused with my hand on the knob, my back to them. For a moment, I wanted to turn around, scream the truth in their faces, list every sacrifice I'd made. But I didn't. I opened the door, stepped into the cold night, and let it slam shut behind me. The air outside was sharp, biting at my lungs. I pulled my coat tight and started walking, no direction in mind, just away. The sound of my footsteps echoed in the quiet neighborhood. A dog barked in the distance. A light flicked on in a neighbor's window. Life went on, while mine was cracking apart. I wandered for blocks before I realized my hands were numb. I ducked into a gas station, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The cashier glanced up, uninterested. I bought a cheap cup of coffee, the steam warming my face. Sitting by the window, I watched cars pass, wondering where I would go. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed on a friend's couch, staring at the ceiling, every word from dinner replaying in my head like a broken record. My father's silence. My mother's accusation. Hannah's smirk. The next morning, I packed a bag and found the smallest apartment I could afford. A place where no one knew me, where no one expected me to carry their burdens. And I never went back. But standing on that sidewalk months later, my phone buzzing in my hand, I could still hear the echo of that night. The scrape of the chair, the slam of the door, the cold silence that told me I didn't belong. The night it all broke wasn't just a fight. It was the night I realized I'd been living in a house where love was conditional, loyalty was blind, and I would always be the outsider. And once you see that truth, you can't unsee it. The morning after I left, I stood in front of a rundown apartment complex with a duffel bag slung over my shoulder. My eyes burned from lack of sleep, but I didn't let myself cry. I had promised myself that last night. No more tears for people who had never once shed them for me. The building looked tired, like it had given up years ago. Paint peeling off the siding, a broken porch light flickering at the entrance. But the landlord was willing to rent it for cheap, no questions asked. That was all I needed. Inside, the place smelled faintly of mildew and cigarettes, but it was mine. Four walls, a roof, and a door that locked. I dragged my bag to the corner, sat on the worn carpet, and breathed in the silence. No yelling. No footsteps storming down the hallway. Just quiet. That first night, I slept on the floor, curled up in my coat. The radiator clanked like an old man coughing, but the uneven warmth felt comforting. My dreams, though, weren't so kind. I woke in the dark, heart racing, Hannah's words echoing. "You've ruined our lives." The next few weeks blurred together. I picked up extra shifts at the diner, pouring coffee for truck drivers and wiping down sticky tables. My feet ached, and I came home smelling of grease and burnt toast. But every paycheck, no matter how small, reminded me that I was surviving on my own. The apartment slowly filled with second-hand furniture I hauled in from thrift stores and curbside giveaways. A sagging couch, a chipped coffee table, mismatched dishes. Each piece felt like a victory, proof that I could build something without anyone else's approval. Still, the loneliness crept in at night. The silence that had felt like freedom began to stretch too wide. Sometimes I'd turn on the TV just to hear voices. Sometimes I'd leave the window cracked to catch the sound of cars passing, people living their lives. One evening, after a late shift, I came home to find a plate of cookies on my doorstep. A note rested on top in shaky handwriting. "Welcome to the building. Mrs. Parker, apartment 3B. Mrs. Parker turned out to be a widow in her 70s with silver hair pinned back in neat curls. She knocked on my door the next day, asking if I liked chocolate chip. Her voice had the warmth of someone who had learned to fill empty rooms with kindness. "You're young to be living alone," she said, peering around my sparsely decorated place. "Family close by?" I hesitated, then shook my head. "Not anymore." She didn't press. Instead, she smiled softly. "Well, if you ever need company, my door's always open." That small gesture cracked something open in me. For weeks, I'd been drifting in isolation, convinced I deserved it. But Mrs. Parker's cookies reminded me that connection didn't have to hurt. Soon, little routines began to stitch my life together. Morning jogs through the park before work. Evenings spent reading paperbacks I borrowed from the library. Weekends when I'd scrub the apartment until the place smelled faintly of lemon soap, as if order on the outside might steady the chaos inside. At the diner, regulars began to recognize me. A trucker named Frank always asked for the girl with the steady hands to pour his coffee. A single mom with 2 kids slipped me drawings her little boy made of superheroes, saying I looked like the nice lady who saves the day. These small acknowledgments mattered more than they should have. Strangers saw me, something my own family had never managed. But independence came with shadows too. One night, I came home late and found my door slightly ajar. My stomach dropped. I pushed it open slowly, my heart thundering. Inside, nothing was missing, except the sense of safety I'd been clinging to. The landlord brushed it off as a faulty lock, but I started double bolting it anyway. Another night, the power went out during a storm. I lit a candle and sat on the couch, listening to the rain pound the roof. The darkness pressed close, and memories of my family's house crowded in. Dad sitting in his recliner, Mom folding laundry, Hannah scrolling on her phone with that ever-present smirk. I realized I missed not the people themselves, but the idea of belonging. That realization cut deep. Still, I pushed forward. I enrolled in an online bookkeeping course with the diner tips I'd saved, determined to carve out a future that was mine alone. I spent late nights at the kitchen table, the glow of my laptop lighting the room while I scribbled notes in a battered notebook. One evening, Mrs. Parker knocked again. She handed me a bowl of soup, shaking her head. "You work too hard, Sarah. Don't forget to take care of yourself." Her words stayed with me. No one had ever said that to me before. Slowly, I began to open up. I told her little pieces of my story. Not the whole truth, just fragments. She never judged, never pried. She simply listened. That was enough. There were setbacks too. Some days, exhaustion pulled me under. Once, I came home to find an envelope slipped under my door, a bill I'd forgotten to pay. My chest tightened as panic set in. But instead of spiraling, I picked up the phone, called the utility company and set up a payment plan. Small victories. The more I handled alone, the stronger I felt. Each solved problem, each dollar saved, was another brick in the foundation of a life no one could take credit for but me. Yet the nights were still the hardest. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, fighting the urge to pick up the phone and call the people who had cast me out. Not because I missed them, but because some part of me still wanted to hear them admit they were wrong. That call never came. Not then. Instead, I clung to the life I was building. One shift, one bill, one borrowed book at a time. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy. But it was mine. And as I locked my door each night, the deadbolt clicking into place, I whispered the same words to myself. "You're not their scapegoat anymore." For the first time in my life, I started to believe it. For weeks, life moved in quiet rhythms: work, study, sleep, repeat. The chaos of my family felt like a shadow that had finally stopped following me. But shadows have a way of finding cracks to slip through. And mine arrived one gray Thursday afternoon. I had just come home from the diner, shoes sticky from spilled soda, when I noticed the red voicemail light blinking on my phone. My stomach tightened. Hardly anyone called me. My number was new, given only to the landlord, Mrs. Parker, and the diner manager. With a shaky breath, I pressed play. "Sarah, it's me." The voice froze me in place. "Hannah." Her tone wasn't sharp or smug, the way I remembered. It was strained, trembling, like she was balancing on the edge of something dangerous. "I don't even know why I'm calling. I thought maybe you should hear it from me first." A pause, then a shaky inhale. "Things aren't how they look. They never were." The message ended abruptly, leaving me staring at the phone like it had betrayed me. I should have deleted it. I should have tossed the phone into the trash, slammed the door, and gone back to the life I was clawing together. But curiosity is a cruel master. For all her cruelty, Hannah had never sounded like that. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the building set my nerves jangling. But it wasn't fear of the dark that kept me awake. It was her words. "Things aren't how they look." The next day, Exhaustion tugged at me through my shift. By evening, I gave in and called the number back. She answered on the second ring. Sarah. Her voice cracked on my name, and for a split second, I heard my sister, the girl who used to braid my hair before school, who once shared secrets with me under a blanket fort. But that girl had vanished years ago, replaced by someone who had fed me to the wolves. What do you want, Hannah? My words came out colder than I intended. Silence, then a soft sob. I messed up. I leaned against the counter, gripping the phone tighter. That's not news. No, you don't understand. Dad. Mom, it wasn't all me. They. Her voice broke again, then steadied. They made me say things. They told me if I didn't, I'd be the one cast out. I was scared, Sarah. My chest tightened. You're saying you lied because you were scared of being in my shoes? Yes, she whispered. But it didn't stop there. It never stops, you know? They need someone to blame. Someone to bleed for their mistakes. I wanted to hang up. I wanted to scream at her. To remind her that while she played the obedient daughter, I became the family's ghost. But something in her voice, the rawness, held me. Why now? I asked quietly. She sniffled. Because it's happening to me now. Dad's angry all the time, and Mom just looks the other way. They're saying I ruined everything. That if I'd done what I was supposed to, none of this would have happened. I can't breathe in that house anymore. Her words tumbled over each other, frantic and desperate. I closed my eyes, fighting the flood of emotions crashing through me. For so long, I had painted her as the villain of my story, and she had been in part. But now she was crumbling under the same weight that had crushed me. You should leave, I heard myself say. I can't, she whispered. I don't have anywhere to go. I thought maybe. The silence that followed was suffocating. I knew what she was asking, even if she didn't say it outright. I'm not your safety net, Hannah, I said finally, my voice trembling. Not after everything. A soft sob echoed on the other end. I know. I didn't know who else to call. The line went dead, leaving me staring at the phone in my hand. That night, memories I had locked away broke free. Hannah laughing as I took the blame for her broken curfew. Hannah standing silent while Dad's fury fell on me. Hannah's smirk when Mom declared me the problem child. And yet, woven between those betrayals were softer threads. Hannah holding my hand during thunderstorms. Hannah covering for me when I failed a math test. Hannah sneaking candy into my backpack before school trips. The truth about my sister wasn't simple. She wasn't just the villain. She was a survivor, same as me. Only she had chosen compliance while I had chosen rebellion. Both of us had paid the price. The days that followed blurred with unease. Every time my phone buzzed, I flinched. She called twice more, left voicemails I couldn't bring myself to answer. In one she sounded panicked. In another, hollow, like she'd given up. Mrs. Parker noticed my distraction one evening as she handed me a plate of lemon bars. You look like you're carrying a storm on your shoulders, dear. I forced a smile. Just family stuff. Her eyes softened with a wisdom that only comes from years of weathering storms. Family can break us worse than strangers ever could. But remember, you don't owe anyone your peace. That night, I sat by the window, watching the city lights blur in the rain. I realized the truth wasn't just about Hannah, it was about me. For years, I had believed the roles carved into us were permanent. Me the scapegoat, her the golden child. But roles shift. Masks crack. And sometimes, the people who hurt us are also the ones hurting the most. Still, I couldn't ignore the anger simmering beneath my sympathy. She had chosen them over me. She had stayed silent when her voice could have freed me. And now, when her world was falling apart, she reached for me like a lifeline. Was it fair? No. But life with my family had never been fair. As I locked my door and turned off the lights, one thought lingered like smoke in my chest. Maybe the real betrayal wasn't that Hannah had lied. It was that I had ever believed she wouldn't. The night Hannah's last voicemail played, I sat in the dark with only the faint hum of the refrigerator for company. Her words echoed in my head, jagged and desperate. I don't have anywhere to go. I thought maybe. For hours I didn't move. My body was still, but my mind was a war zone. Part of me ached to run to her, to pull her out of the same cage I had escaped. The other part, the louder, sharper part, remembered every wound she had helped carve into me. Was I supposed to forget years of silence? The way she watched as I was torn down? The way she chose her comfort over my dignity? I pressed the phone to my chest and whispered into the emptiness. What do you want from me, Hannah? The question wasn't really for her. It was for myself. The next morning, I walked into the diner half asleep, my apron strings hanging loose. Marcy, the morning cook, raised an eyebrow. You look like you spent the night wrestling ghosts. Something like that, I muttered. She slid me a cup of coffee before I even asked. Drink, then talk. I hesitated, but words spilled out quicker than I meant them to. I told her about the calls, about Hannah's sudden unraveling, about my own confusion. Marcy listened in silence, her hands never pausing as she buttered toast. When I finally ran out of words, she set the plate down and leaned on the counter. Family's tricky, she said softly. They can break you down, then come crawling when their own walls collapse. Question is, do you let them back in, or do you keep the door locked? I wrapped my hands around the mug, staring at the steam. What would you do? She gave me a small, knowing smile. Doesn't matter what I'd do. What matters is, if you open that door, can you live with what comes next? Her words followed me all day. That evening, my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Hannah. It was Mom. I froze, my heart pounding as her name lit up the screen. For a moment, I thought about letting it ring out. But something inside me, the stubborn child who once begged for her love, pressed accept. Sarah. Her voice was cautious, almost rehearsed. I clenched my jaw. What do you want? A pause, then a sigh heavy with weariness. Your sister's in trouble. She needs you. I laughed, bitter and sharp. She needed me years ago, and you didn't care. She's still your sister, Mom said, her tone sharpening. Blood is blood. I felt something snap inside me. You only remember that when it's convenient. When I was the one bleeding, you looked the other way. The silence on the other end was deafening. Finally, Mom spoke again, softer this time. Please, just think about it. The line clicked dead, leaving me shaking. That night, I walked through the rain, letting the cold soak through my jacket. My mind was tangled. Love and resentment, loyalty and freedom. I found myself standing in front of the library, its lights glowing warm against the storm. I ducked inside, dripping onto the carpet. The quiet air smelled of paper and dust, and I felt a strange calm settle over me. Wandering aimlessly, I found myself in the self-help section, staring at titles about breaking cycles, reclaiming identity, choosing peace. One book caught my eye. The Power of Walking Away. I pulled it from the shelf and flipped it open, landing on a passage that read, sometimes the bravest decision is not to fight harder, but to stop fighting for those who never fought for you. My breath caught. It felt like the words were aimed straight at me. The following days blurred with indecision. At the diner, I fumbled orders. At night, I stared at the ceiling until dawn. Every time I considered helping Hannah, anger rose up, reminding me of scars not yet healed. Every time I thought of ignoring her, guilt whispered that I was abandoning her like they abandoned me. One evening, Mrs. Parker knocked on my door holding a basket of warm rolls. She studied my tired face. You're standing at a crossroads, aren't you? I nodded. How do you know? Her smile was sad. I was 20 when I walked away from my family. People think leaving is the hardest part, but it's not. The hardest part is not looking back. Her words sank deep. That night, I sat at my small kitchen table, pen and paper in hand. For the first time in years, I wrote a letter, not to my parents, not to Hannah, but to myself. You do not owe them your healing. You do not owe them your peace. You do not owe them the pieces of yourself they already broke. Tears blurred the words, but I kept writing. You can choose freedom. You can choose silence. You can choose you. When I finished, I folded the letter and tucked it in my journal. My decision wasn't spoken aloud, but it pulsed inside me with quiet certainty. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. Hannah's name lit up the screen. For a long moment, I stared at it. My hand hovered, trembling. Then slowly I pressed decline. The sound of the call ending was like a door closing. Not slammed in anger, Not locked in bitterness, just closed. I whispered into the stillness, "I choose me." And for the first time in years, the weight on my chest lifted.